Hello again, everybody. Today I'm laying on my couch because my pup has decided that he wants to be very cuddly, and I am kind of locked in. So I'm going to be lying at a weird angle just so he doesn't move. But in case you haven't figured out, my voice is really fucked up because of just a long week that I had prior, and I ended up getting a sinus infection. So I'm going to do a bit of a shorter video simply because I want to preserve my ability to talk. I may not do a addition to my series of recording every song that I did this month, or I'm sorry, this week. That might get pushed on to the later end of the month. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll get more energy. But I was thinking about something the other day. So right now I teach at a music school, and for the first time since I've been working there, instead of having a performance season where every group does their own genre, we're actually all doing the same genre. And this time around, it's funk and neo soul. So I'm not going to go into the genre descriptions of funk. I'm pretty sure everybody, kind of understands what funk is. But neo soul, I'm going to go into a quick kind of recap for. So neo soul is really any soul based music, R&B, that kind of stuff that came out from the late 90s all the way till now. I'm sure you'll hear a lot of memes about how neo soul really blew up in like the early 2010s thanks to like Instagram, and like all that stuff. And then there's like the most iconic band to me when I think of something like neo soul, Wolfpack. Like those guys. The combination right there really propelled that genre. But it's been around substantially longer than either Instagram or Wolfpack. We're talking late 90s when they initially characterized this genre, right? So new soul music has been coming on for quite a long time. And I'm down for it. Totally love it. I love both of those genres. As a multi instrumentalist, there's a lot to take away from both of those genres in virtually any instrument capacity. But it kind of got me thinking about something. When I first started labeling my music, when I was trying to get out there, take my blues trio, which, I labeled it as blues, kind of took the easy way out, but I'll get onto that. I had this trio, and I was like, what are we going to call ourselves? Like, what is our genre? Because we're not really blues. Yes, some of our stuff is. I mean, it's like hard, like, actual blues. And you'll find that true as I do some of my later songs for my album in my main series. But from what I've been putting out right now, only like Miss the Train Blues is kind of that. And even then, that's more of like a modern, like 80s blues revision style of blues. It's not like that traditional, old Delta style blues that a lot of people think of. So as my trio, started getting bigger, it was really hard to label what my music was. And then we had the ultimate situation happen where we were talking with two labels about how we're going to market my music. One of the labels wanted to take the very generic approach of like, hey, it's got some pop mainstream appeal, but you're still kind of in that alternative kind of umbrella, right? Because it's not mainstream in the sense of like, you can't compete with artists like fucking, if we're looking at pop, you can't compete with like Taylor Swift, you can't compete with Nicki Minaj, you can't compete with, all that shit. And this is before bands like Greta Van Fleet came and kind of revamped things a little bit, so actual bands could kind of make it on there. So they wanted to go more like the alternative route with like bands that were kind of coming prevalent at the time, like Kings of Leon. Those are the ones that like really. That's the one that really stands out to me. That kind of like did a pre Greta Van Fleet of like, all right, a band is still relevant. A band is still able to make stuff happen on the charts, just not in that mainstream flow that we think of, like how things used to be. The other one had something a little bit more interesting. They didn't necessarily want to bank on the blues aspect. They both, I'll be 100% upfront, both labels did not agree with the blues moniker that I named. And I, during conversations, was like, well, I kind of like to look at us as a modern blues band. And one of the guys scoffed and was just like, well, what the fuck is that? Like politely, but he's just like, can you elaborate on that? And I'm like, well, we're taking a lot of influences from music, obviously from blues, that's kind of like my predominant genre, but we're also taking a lot of things that came after. And when I'm starting to think about that conversation that I had, I was really kind of talking about neo soul. I was taking a lot of black based music from the 70s, 80s, 90s, R&B, funk, groove, like all these things, and like also taking some modern music approach. Like there's always that critique, that like white people have, taken over some predominantly black genres before. Blues was the biggest thing. Soul ended up becoming one. A lot of bands that came out have been, more on the whiter side of things, and I've heard some pushback on things like that. Cultural appropriation, don't really want to throw around that word too much, but there's obviously substantial evidence to it. But when I'm kind of talking to them about all the different genres that we're blending, because, like there's not a lot of, influence from the bands that came around when I was alive. I grew up in the 90s. So we got like Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, Eminem, Foo Fighters had just started. Like Foo Fighters was like the only band that I was aware of at that time. And honestly, I didn't really even pick up on them until in the 2000s after they've got like their third album fucking released. Bands weren't really a thing. In the 2000s, the two bands I kind of gravitated to the most were Coldplay and Killers. And I would definitely say they influenced me as a musician, but did not influence my music. So when I was talking about bands that had came out in the time period that I listened to, that my bassist listened to, that my drummer listened to, we all had some kind of similar taste, but at the same time, we all had our own things. We were just this melting pot. And looking back now, thinking about that conversation, thinking about what my school's doing, with doing neo soul, I was just like, fuck, you know what? That's what I am. That's what I was. I was a neo soul trio. And that's a hard thing to kind of swallow because let's look at some predominant things that are, carryovers from both soul, and neo soul. There's still a lot of funk emphasis. So that means big bands. You have horns, you have multiple keyboardists, you have like a really big band kind of mentality. We didn't have that. We were a trio. You also have really strong driving vocals. I definitely think my voice is unique, and not just because I'm sick, but I would not say I am a strong singer in the vein of like Marvin Gaye or James Brown, things like that. Some predominant like soul guys. And then when we're looking at neo soul, however, there's actually almost an emphasis on female vocals kind of being more of the lead kind of thing. As the genre progressed over the 2010s, a lot more male vocalists ended up kind of jumping onto it. I can't really think of anyone that stands out to me right now, but that was something we were kind of doing against the grain at the time because, my project started in 2011 and then ended in 2013. So this is still at the height of like, we're only 10 years into the genre itself, before it really got big, thanks to Instagram, Wolfpack, all that stuff. And the only thing that I think that really stood out was the lyrical structure, the story. It's usually about love, it's about peace, it's about hope, inspiration, things like that. A lot of my lyrics later on in my songs are at that level, but there's still a lot of blues bass. There's a lot of expression in my music. And that's where I kind of think the neo soul aspect is what I was tapping into, even if the reference was kind of, its grandfather, blues. Soul is the opposite of blues in the sense of, what do we call our sadness? It's the blues. But soul is that passion. It's that fire that's inside and you hear it. They're blues and soul are partners. One could argue that soul is the other side of the coin, the happiness, but there's some very sad soul songs out there and they hit you hard. That's what's always drawn me about black music. I listened to white music for most of my life, but my early life and my teens was predominantly black music because my dad, my uncle were blues musicians. And hearing that power, that emotion, something caught me about it. And I could totally understand like an artist like fucking Eminem, in the 90s, just being in a bad atmosphere, bad culture, but hearing a lot of black music because that's where he lived, that's what he liked to do. And then like, rising up and like taking that same power, that delivery, that emotion and expression and able to turn it out. I could totally see the hate that he got in the time period and that a lot of, white people get accused of cultural appropriation. I'm not white. I'm Hispanic. I'm basically first generation American on my dad's side. I mean, he was born a couple of months after his parents immigrated to Mexico. So, I'm not going to play that card, but it's something I want to be aware of because there's a lot of Mexican influence in my life. There's a lot of Spanish music influence in my life. That's going to come across in some later work, and I'll talk more about it in my later work. But since we're talking about recording all my music chronologically, blues was the thing that I drew from a lot. Soul was another genre I was taking from because I loved the expression, I loved the delivery, I love the heart of songs like that. And there are white artists who can do that. There's Asian artists who can do that. There's Mexican artists who can do that. But that genre that was pioneered, crafted, all from African American music, emigrating over, and keeping that tradition alive. There's something to be said about that, man. And that really comes across in a lot of music. Today, I don't think it's lost. I think the people who are serious about that genre, neo soul, blues, anything like that, even rap, I mean, there's still a passion and a love and a dedication. And it should always be, whatever your music is, whatever your genre is, you should have a sincerity. And I feel modern music today is lacking seriously in sincerity. But I'm going to get on that another time. When I ended up going back to the conversation of how I ended up marketing myself, they were like, we kind of get your approach, but trust us, we know what we're doing. And they wanted to basically take us and rewrite a lot of our work to be more pop orientated. So they wanted to try and market us as a pop style band. They were going to throw more instruments in, and they were going to rechange some of my songs, and that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And this was the bigger of the two labels, so I was like, fuck, this is not necessarily what I'm signing up for. We had already mostly recorded our album at that point. We were basically done. It was just something to kind of have out there to keep us in. And we ended up doing some shows with our talent agency. Some things ended up happening, and it ended up imploding, and we lost our label, and we lost all this shit. I'm almost thankful for that, because years later now, I'm looking back at all the things that I did, all the songs that I wrote, and I struggled all that time to really market myself and think about what I am. And now, years later, just from working at my school and looking at all the songs that some of these groups, both groups that I'm teaching and groups that are, just a part of the school right now, there's so much diversity in a genre like neo soul. It's nice to have a descriptor that I can finally put on my music. I am a neo soul artist. I have been a neo soul artist for a long time. It's comforting. But as the title of the video is suggesting, it's also really irrelevant. I went for years mismarketing myself. And yes, it would have substantially helped my claim, especially as a beginning artist, to kind of get myself up there. But that's because I was trying to pursue the label. If you're going to do something like an independent route, genres don't really mean anything anymore. It's nice to have something to market yourself as, so when you talk to people who aren't musicians, you can say, yes, I sound like this band. My influences are these genres. This is what I consider myself. I literally had business cards when I was doing our band, and it said modern blues musicians. That's what it said, modern blues. People are always saying, what's modern blues? I'm like, well, it's blues with a lot of modern influences. It's easy to fucking roll off the tongue, and, but every now and then there'd be a musician or a person who would ask, would be like, so what influences are you taking from? And I'd have to, go through. It's like, well, there's a lot of soul influence. There's a lot of, funk and like our swing and how we do things. And there's even some modern stuff, like I listen to these bands and some of their lyrical stuff has stood out to me. Some of their guitar riffs have stood out to me. Like John Mayer was a huge influence on me in my later career. It inspired me to get better at guitar. So John Mayer had a blues trio, right? But his overall music is pop. That's what it's been labeled as for the longest time. And that's kind of why I hated him for the longest time. Because his first two albums, even now, as a huge fan of him, I can't stand. You play anything off his first two albums, I'll be like, good. From Continuum onward, yeah, okay, you got my fucking interest. But even then, it's not every song until Born and Raised. And then that's almost basically country. But because he had already established himself as basically a pop artist, anything under his umbrella is pop. And that's why genres are basically irrelevant now. When you're marketing yourself, you can have any descriptor that you want, but it's going to tie you down. And I don't think music's like that anymore. We have things like Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, all these mediums, all these ways to get our music out there. And I think we're kind of past genres. I think we can just basically label ourselves as a band, and this is your mission. This is your goals with your music. Get it the fuck out there. If the category, if whatever platform you are on categorizes your music, fuck it. It is what it is. Maybe contest it if you're not getting a lot of plays, but at the same time, who cares? If you revert back to some of my shorts and some of my last videos, your main priorities, regardless of the digital stuff, should still be filling seats, fucking playing out live, and having a good product. If you got those three things down, it doesn't matter. This stuff, what I'm doing right now, laying on the couch, petting my dog's belly while I talk to you guys, this is what keeps people on the radar of what you're doing. This is not what gains initial interest. Playing out, that's what gives people the initial interest. Playing well, that's what keeps their interest. You know what I'm saying? So, this is kind of a weird kind of dichotomy type thing where I'm finally at peace as to what to label myself as in my future. I can basically be like, yeah, I was a blues musician who graduated in neo soul. That's, an oversimplification, but I'm not trying to give my life story to everybody all the time. These videos are one thing. You guys are choosing this stuff. People I'm talking to at my school or, all the musicians I network with, I don't give a fuck. They're doing stuff. I'm not doing anything by comparison. But at the same time, if I'm going to release my music in a professional capacity, I'm not throwing a genre on there. I don't care. If the media picks me up and decides to label me as X thing, so be it. But if I go on a fucking talk show or I do a podcast or a music YouTuber reaches out to me and wants to know more about me, I'll say these are my influences. This is where I was writing. This is where I'm at now. You tell me what you think I am. Because it really is irrelevant. And that's the power that we have as indie musicians with all the capabilities. We don't need to follow a chart system. We don't need to follow a category. We don't need to be in a genre. We just need to be putting out music. And I'm not really sure why I'm releasing this video, because this is kind of, like I said, more of a me thing. It's nice to have something, but it's also irrelevant to me at the same time. But maybe this will help you guys who are really struggling to figure out what is your genre, how do you market yourself, and realize it doesn't matter as long as you're out there. If you start getting up there, if you're doing something just enough to get people's attention, yeah, maybe worry about it. Maybe have something in your back pocket that you can hand out to people. Be like, yeah, modern blues band. Yeah, I'm a neo soul artist. But at the end of the day, it's your music, right? What do you perceive it as? I've written metal songs. I've written rap songs. I've written country songs. But I predominantly write blues and neo soul songs. What are you going to call those? If I start blasting out heavy fucking metal where I'm dropped down to C, are you going to label that fucking neo soul? Fuck no. You going to label that blues? Fuck no. So, but that's because that's what I was considered for such a long time. All of my music's going to follow that. Or am I just jumping ship and doing a new genre? Well, what if it's for one song? What if I don't do a whole album of metal or rap or country or ska? What if I just do a song or two because that's what I'm feeling? That's the box. That's the box that labels want to lock you into. It's why a lot of artists stretch their wings after they fucking break a label or they finish a contract. And everyone's like, all right, what the fuck is this? Why are you doing such crazy stuff? You kind of have your established thing. It's because they finally can take a fucking breath and explore what their musical influences are. They can take all the things they've heard for years and be like, let me give that a shot. That's why we don't need to worry about it anymore. We can avoid that from our small scale. You can do multiple different genres. Do I personally think that's going to go over well in a show? No, unless you do like a variety band type thing. Then that might be a niche for you. But when it comes to an artist wanting to release their music and get it out there, that's why I think it's relevant. So that's all my views on it today. I know I said I was going to keep this short. It's almost short. It's almost under 20 minutes. And my throat's not killing me too bad. So like I said, probably not going to do another video this week because of my throat. If I do, it'll be towards the end of the week. But worst case, I will do 2 videos the following week with my songs chronologically. So y'all have yourselves a good one.